We've heard a lot of thoughts and opinions on Wisconsin's drinking culture, but there is one thing that everyone agrees on: drunk driving. You won't find anyone who says they're for it. And yet, compared to other states, Wisconsin's OWI laws do very little to discourage drunk driving. In fact, Wisconsin has some of the most lenient drunk driving laws in the country.
In a recent 10-year period, we had an average of about 200 drunk driving-related fatalities on Wisconsin roads per year.
It's just the most horrific thing in the world to have the police come to your door in the middle of the night and tell you your son's been killed by a drunk driver.
Most states have stricter drunk driving laws and fewer drunk driving deaths than Wisconsin, according to federal health and safety studies.
I think that by far the majority of people in Wisconsin recognize that we can toughen up our drunk driving laws. I think where the question comes in is how tough do we make them? How much do we toughen them up? It's not a question of if, it's more a question of how much.
I know sometimes we're kind of lumped in as this state that's kind of looks the other way when it comes to drunk driving laws. But if you look at the actual data, I think you see we're further away from that description than most people think we are.
Although Wisconsin and most other states have seen a drop in fatal alcohol-related crashes recently, the state still had the highest drunk driving rate in the nation in 2012, with about a quarter of adults indicating in federal surveys that they drove drunk. Health experts say it only stands to reason that Wisconsin has a serious problem with drunk driving.
If you compare binge drinking rates for each state with their rate of drunk driving, you see there's a very strong correlation. So if we are ever going to seriously get a handle on our drunk driving problem in this state, we're going to have to figure out a way to decrease binge drinking.
There's also an issue with where alcohol is sold in Wisconsin.
Such as gas stations. I mean, the link between alcohol and gasoline, if you want to cut down on drunk driving, it does seem a little strange to be selling alcohol at gas stations.
I would just like to see less drunk driving in Wisconsin, and I think tougher laws are part of the solution.
State Assemblyman Jim Ott introduced 8 bills in 2013 to crack down on drunk driving. Although his colleagues in the Assembly backed 6 of the 8, the state Senate supported just 1. It did become law, but it only clarified an existing law.
I'm not saying that these bills will never pass. I'm going to try again, maybe do some tweaks, maybe try to get more support for them. I'm going to come back and try again.
It all ends up coming down to, I'll say, leadership. You know, somebody who is in a leadership level simply has to step up and say, I want to make this a legislative priority.
It's like any legislative issue, I guess, in that it kind of comes and goes.
State Senate President Scott Fitzgerald defends his and his colleagues' lack of action on OWI bills in the last session. He says a package of OWI laws passed in 2009 is proof the state is not soft on drunk driving.
What is in the best interest of our constituents and still represent the taxpayers and make sure that the state is on track as far as public policy goes. I mean, those are the things that we have to make decisions on when it comes to legislation. We don't want to go overboard, but we also want to make sure that we're being responsible and making good decisions.
But supporters of stricter OWI laws say Wisconsin's 2009 drunk driving laws were just a step in the right direction, and barely that.
And we took that first step knowing that we should have taken a greater step, but that was the step that we could get past at the time.
MAD and its supporters say Wisconsin's high rate of drunk driving is proof the laws are too lax. People aren't worried about the consequences of getting caught. We're the only state where a first OWI offense is not a crime, yet first-time offenders cause a majority of the state's OWI crashes. In Wisconsin, drunk driving is not an automatic felony crime until a 5th offense. What kind of message do you think that sends to the public that other people are able to get away with that?
Well, it certainly sends a message that maybe we're not dealing with it strongly enough in our legal system.
One of Jim Ott's failed OWI bills would have simply required a person to show up in court on a first offense. Still not a crime, not a bigger fine, just the requirement of facing a judge.
Just to say you got to stand there in the courtroom and see what that's like and face the judge and maybe get some kind of a sense of what may happen if you don't change your behavior.
Making the first offense a felony or having the first-time offender have to appear in court, I mean, those are deterrents, but I don't know that that's necessarily the answer.
At least we would send a message that our culture is changing. We are no longer regarding this as a minor problem. We regard this as a serious breach.
And the majority of Wisconsinites agrees. A Marquette Law School poll released in October showed 56% support for making first offense OWI a criminal misdemeanor. Something else other states use to fight drunk driving is sobriety checkpoints. Law enforcement stops all traffic through a certain area looking for people driving under the influence. 38 states have them. Wisconsin has a law against them. What Wisconsin law enforcement can and does do is put extra patrols on stretches of road with a history of OWI accidents and arrests.
And we can target those areas, and we can stop vehicles for equipment violations, we can stop vehicles for speeding, we can stop vehicles for registration violations. And in the process of doing that, we can make contact with that driver and determine whether he or she is driving impaired.
Keeping drunk drivers from even getting on the road is another step in the evolution of OWI laws. Ignition interlock devices won't let a person start a car unless they pass a breathalyzer on the device. MAD wants them required for everyone convicted of drunk driving. Many states, including Wisconsin, require them for some repeat offenders.
What about things like ignition interlock requirements and sobriety checkpoints to catch these people sooner?
Yeah, I mean, anything that the legislature does that affects the general population, whether you're completely sober or below the legal limit as far as drinking, I think there's a natural kind of concern that that's an overreach when it comes to public policy.
Instead, Fitzgerald says he and others support OWI laws that focus on treating the violator rather than punishing them, and on repeat offenders, not first-timers. Programs like OWI courts, in which drunk drivers' rehabilitation is closely monitored by the judge.
As long as the person remains alcoholic, as long as the person remains completely addicted to narcotics, that it doesn't matter what you take away from them or how many times you throw them in jail, they're going to offend again. And that's really what the focus should be, I think, is on those individuals.
But supporters of stricter laws say studies prove you need both treatment and punishment to really convince people not to drink and drive. Health and legal specialists in this area say there are proven drunk driving deterrents, such as sobriety checkpoints, ignition interlocks, criminalizing the first offense, and raising the alcohol tax. They're concerned that politics are coming before good public policy in Wisconsin.
There's too much of a concern that, if we increase the drunk driving, laws, that we're going to annoy some constituency. We're going to upset, this constituency over there. And where politics is today, you don't want to annoy certain constituencies or you don't get the money to be elected.
By constituency, John Vose of MAD is referring to the state's well-organized and well-funded network of alcohol-serving establishments, the Tavern League of Wisconsin.
This idea that we're soft on drunk driving just is not true. I challenge anybody to come up with any data or any proof that we have opposed any drunk driving laws that got tougher on repeat or high BC offenders.
That's Tavern League Executive Director Pete Madland speaking in a 2012 report on OWI laws. The Tavern League and their political lobbying representative refused to be interviewed for this program. While the League has supported tougher repeat offender laws, it has been against criminalizing the first offense, sobriety checkpoints, and raising the alcohol tax. As we talked with supporters of stricter laws, the Tavern League's clout in the Capitol was clear.
They're a big influence in the state of Wisconsin.
We can't fight the Tavern League, nor do we want to.
Like binge drinking, drunk driving is another area where Wisconsin's drinking culture veers sharply from its European, distinctly German heritage.
Their drunk driving laws are far more severe than ours, and drunk driving is simply not tolerated.
Should Wisconsin be more like that?
Oh boy, now I'm going to open up Pandora's box by making a statement, and all I can tell you is what I heard and saw in Germany, and they don't seem to have the issue, certainly with drinking and driving at all, that we do. And I think it's just because they are so strict and so tough. So obviously it works in that way.